The impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Denton. It is vampires, and there's a host of damned souls at Pelham House.
Thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. He can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hi everybody, this is Irene Allen, the host of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And...
Say it. Say it.
Here I am today with Mark. Nearly here I am today with Mark Johnson.
I still crack up after all this time. You've flubbed my name. We only been working together a dozen years.
10, over 10, isn't it?
About 12.
12, maybe more.
Yeah.
Getting on. Yeah.
And then here's the real irony part. When this show premieres, I will actually be right there with you in the UK.
Wow. And are we going to do a show from the UK?
I think we should.
Yeah?
Yeah, we'll do one of our...
I'm getting the chair. You can sit on the floor.
We'll do one of our just you and I banter shows.
Yeah, could do, couldn't we?
That should be a lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah, but as of this recording, I'll be leaving in a couple days to fly over and be there for about 12 days. So looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm. You land on Friday.
And that's what I was saying. The irony is you and I have worked together for so long, and this will be the first time we actually get to see each other in person.
Well, I have been avoiding you, darling.
Well, I know that. You are evil that way.
I know, but it gets to a point where you run out of excuses, don't you?
True, very true.
I'm looking forward to meeting you. Not meeting you, seeing you. Yes. I already know you, so seeing you, sweetie.
That's true. That's true. Well, we're going to have a lot of fun, so I'm looking forward to it. And I will be taking lots of pictures and even filming, and might be able to put together a little documentary out of it. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll be singing in the rain.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you stand out soaking in the rain. I'll be undercover.
You gotta be joking. Who do you think you are?
The one who wants to stay dry.
For me in the rain, you haven't got a chance, darling.
Yeah, I know. You'll yank me out there and
I'll throw you out there.
Into the mud. Oh, good Lord. Well, I'm looking forward to it, so it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and get going on the show here. We got a great guest, a returning guest. Tonight we have Bruce Gernon joining us. Now, Bruce has a new book out called Bermuda Triangle Survivor. Pilot tells what he experienced in the heart of the phenomenon. And we talked with Bruce a few years ago about his experiences, and I guess he has some more information on what he experienced in the Bermuda Triangle. So, Bruce, welcome back to the program.
Well, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. Hi, Irene.
Hello, sweetie.
Now, just so our any new listeners are tuning in, let's talk a little bit about your background, what led up to the event, and then we can, I guess, move forward from there on what the new book covers.
Okay, yeah. Did you hear that thunder go off here when you announced my name?
Please tell me there's clouds in the sky.
Yeah, I guess it's just a coincidence. But
Okay.
I'm into thunderstorms ever since I was born. My mother told me it was the largest thunderstorm she was ever in when I was born.
Oh.
So ever since then, I've had an affinity for thunderstorms and everything related to them.
I love thunderstorms myself. In fact, last weekend I was sitting down at the Jersey Shore and a big one rolled in, and I'm just sitting on my balcony watching it and filming the lightning strikes. So, yeah, I'm right there with you, Bruce.
Neat, yeah. Well, that's what this story experience that I'm about to tell you is really all about, thunderstorms.
So, how long have you been a pilot for?
Well, I started flying when I was 17, and then got my license when I was 18. So it's been close to 60 years.
Wow, long time. Are you still flying these days?
No, not anymore. I had to retire because my sight.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll do it. Well, you've had a great career with flying, and now your experience, it's been featured on numerous documentaries and television shows, and it's probably one of the more interesting stories to come out of the Bermuda Triangle because you experienced something and actually came out of it to tell your story, where so many people have disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle over the last 100 years. Now, what year did your experience originally happen?
It originally happened on December 4th of 1970. And I've been researching it ever since. What was that?
Bruce?
Yes.
Bruce, can you hear me all right? Bruce, have you flown through the Bermuda Triangle quite a few times?
Yes, I flew.
Or was it just this once?
Many times. I can't count them, really. I started flying there in, it was around, right after I got my license in 1966 was the first time I flew there. And then I started going there with my dad on business venture, searching for property. And we did that for 5 years. We'd fly usually about once a month. We'd go to a different area of the Bahamas, investigate the property till we finally located what we wanted to develop on Andros Island, the largest island. Islands.
I see. And did you know about the legend of the Bermuda Triangle before your experience? And did it frighten you? If you did?
Before the experience?
Before your experience, did you know about the Bermuda Triangle, about these things disappearing, ships and planes and things?
No, I didn't know anything about the name anyway. And I did know that Bimini, for some reason, they called it a mysterious island. I went there when I was only 15, and I didn't understand why they called it that. But now I understand why. It's like the apex of the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah.
And apparently, people disappear. Some of the natives that were born there, they seem to disappear every now and then, and so they call it mysterious. And a lot of strange things there.
So you're saying not only ships and planes disappear, but people actually on the islands have been known to vanish.
Yes.
Interesting. I had not heard that one before.
Yeah, it's a legendary island. They call it. They've been calling it a mysterious island for many decades.
Well, I do know that divers had discovered what they called the Bimini Road off the island, which looks like cut stones in the ocean floor that look like a road of some kind or maybe an old wall. And I know scientists have tried to dismiss it as being cut by ocean currents and whatnot, but it looks man-made to me.
Yes, it does. It's just controversial with hardcore scientists, mainstream scientists. They're always like that. They need more data. Always need more data.
Mm-hmm.
I was friends with the person who really discovered it. His name was Dr. Manson Valentine's, and he discovered me too. He put me in a book by his partner Charles Berlitz, and that was the first time I was exposed to the world in a best-selling book.
Yes, I read Charles Berlitz's original book.
But before, back to that question, did I know anything about the Bermuda Triangle when I was flying all over the Bahamas? The answer was absolutely no, except I had two mentors that had flown to the islands a lot more than me. They were in the real estate business, and I was working with them at the time. And the two of them once had an experience, and it was near Andros Island too. And whenever they would explain it, which was fairly often, I could tell there was something strange going on there, because they would really get excited when they started explaining what they experienced. It was a very strange cloud, a huge storm cloud that instantly and built up at a fantastic rate. And the one pilot compared it to atomic bomb, and he had actually seen the atomic bomb go off over in Hiroshima. He was the backup captain of a B-29 with Jimmy Doolittle was the head plane, and he dropped the bomb. He had a backup bomb in case Doolittle's bomb didn't go off. And so he actually saw the bomb, and he compared it to that. So I realized, wow, there's something definitely unusual in that.
Actually, that's a fascinating piece of history. I never knew that there was a backup bomb plane following the original plane.
Yeah, I found that hard to believe too. I always used to think he was just bragging and got a little carried away with his bragging, because he used to claim, well, he's been in the eye of a hurricane and was the backup bomber for Jimmy Doolittle. But then I read an article once that did say that he was the backup bomber.
Interesting, very interesting. So, in 1970, what was your flight plan for the day? What were you out just for pleasure flying? Were you conducting business of some kind?
We were conducting business. We had spent the day there on Thursday coordinating development of an island there just right offshore of Andros Island, and working with the English Parliament that owned all the land there. And we had planned on leaving first thing in the morning, but on Friday, but there were heavy storms all over the island of Andros, so we had to hold off until 3 p.m. is when we were able to depart the island and head back to Palm Beach International was the plan. And I had done that probably a dozen times or so, the exact flight path. But I had flown in the Bahamas for probably 400 hours, maybe 100 different times at the time. And I was the pilot in command. My dad was also a pilot, but he was chief navigator. I was a pretty good pilot, so they let me be the pilot in command.
So was it on the way back from the island that you had your experience?
Right, it was on the way back from Andros. When we reached the Great Bahama Bank is where it took place. That's a very... area. It's one of the largest shallow banks in all of the Caribbean. And it lies between Andros and Bimini Island. And it's usually an average of 10 feet deep. And,
wow. So what did this experience feel like?
What did I think about the bank?
What did the experience actually feel like?
Physically?
Yeah, physically and mentally. Mm.
Well, there were a couple of physical things that were unusual. When I first saw the birth of this storm, it looked like a lenticular cloud that was hovering 500 feet above, above the ocean, and it was just motionless, but there wasn't any wind, so that wasn't unusual. But the cloud looked very unusual. It had very smooth edges, and these clouds usually only form at high altitudes, 20,000 feet or higher. But it looked harmless, and it was right in my flight path, so I just flew over it, and then all of a sudden it spread out. And then while I'm climbing up at 1,000 feet per minute, when I got to about 3,000 feet,
yeah,
it reached me, underneath me, caught up to me. And I'm climbing at 105 miles an hour going forward. And at the time, I didn't realize it not only reached me at the vertical speed, it reached me at the horizontal speed. Mm. So it was spreading out at over 1,000 feet a minute going up, and it was spreading at way over 105 miles an hour. That's how fast I was going. And then when it caught up to me, I went inside of it, and it was low visibility, but yeah, it gave me a boost when I went inside it. So that was the first physical feeling that I got.
Oh, like energy?
Yeah.
Like a burst of energy?
Yeah, so it was, of course, I'm climbing at 1,000 feet a minute, so it maybe gets climbing at 2,000 feet a minute, I'm not sure. But
yeah.
Go inside it, and then since I'm climbing, now I'm climbing with it, so I'd get above it. I'd pop out of it. Yeah. But then I only get maybe a couple hundred feet above it, and then it would catch right up to me again, and I'd go back in it. So
how did you get away from it? It was like it was trying to envelop you, as if it was trying to catch you.
Yeah.
So
we started to get a little nervous when we got above 10,500 feet, because we were planning on leveling off at that required altitude, and we were still inside it. My dad suggested that we turn around and go back, but I decided not to do that, not yet anyway, because it would have been worse situation trying to go back into this strange cloud.
Yeah.
So when we got to 11,500, we popped out of it, and I was in clear blue sky again. And when I looked around me, behind me, I was amazed that this little cloud had spread out all around me, behind me. And it had built up to over 30,000 feet.
Yeah.
And it had a strange form to it. It was like perfectly symmetrical. As far as I could see, behind me, it was like a horseshoe shape. And so I leveled off and started cruising at 200 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. Forgot about what I had just experienced and concentrated on flying the airplane. Yeah. And then only like 5 minutes later, I'm looking forward and I see a huge storm in front of me, and it was like built up to like over 40,000 feet. And it had that strange, perfect, symmetric curve to it on each side in front of me as far as I could see. Yeah. And another strange thing about it was I figured I was going to fly under it, but I couldn't do that because it was laying right on the surface of the ocean.
Right, when you went through it, you said that you had poor vision. Were you able to see anything at all? Pick anything out? Like land or anything?
Once I entered it, yeah, it was this time it was like 40,000 feet high.
Yeah.
Aiming on a flight plan direct to Bimini, so I stayed on my flight path and went inside the storm, and this time it was more clear. I could see at least a couple miles because I could see the ocean, and there wasn't any rain, precipitation, none, and so I went in. The deeper I got, the worse it got. I went in over 2 miles in it, and that's when the lightning flashes started going, really powerful flashes, and it got to the point where I couldn't see anything when there were no flashes because it was so dark, and then when it flashed, I could see the ocean below me very clearly. But it got really intense with the electricity, so I decided to turn around and fly out of it.
Bruce, when you see films on the television about the Bermuda Triangle and things like very similar, there's always this, not evil, but how would you put it? Not scary. Really. Mark, can you help me? Do you know what I mean?
I'm not sure where you're going with that, unless you're talking about like a heavy feeling or not quite negative, but
that paranormal feeling that something is really going to happen and something's going to come out of it or whatever.
Yeah, something paranormal. Some people think that something paranormal is going on here.
Yeah. Did you feel that? Did you get that feeling of maybe that this thing had a mind of its own or anything?
Yeah, that's the question that a lot of people used to tell me. We thought it had a mind. Even recently, working.
Did you feel that it had its own intelligence or anything? That it was after you? It was trying to get you? I'll tell you what, I'm amazed that you managed, when you got out of it, to pull yourself together and fly that plane, put everything behind you and just concentrate on flying that plane. I think I would have been in absolute pieces.
Well,
obviously you have to, don't you? Otherwise you'll crash.
If it's paranormal, UFOs and aliens might have something to do with it. Because when I look back at what I experienced, it's almost like I was guided by some entity, because the timing was precise. And it was just almost too perfect. If I had made a wrong turn or flown a little faster or a little slower, I may have got lost inside it. But everything
things would have been different.
Absolutely perfect. That there was this shape like a donut, and I was caught in the middle of it. That I found the escape route through a tunnel.
It's like a Stargate, isn't it? It's like a portal.
Yeah, it was we could call it a portal. And when I reached the other end, it closed. Right behind me, it was getting smaller and smaller as I went through it. And so here the timing again was incredible. I was able to reach the other end right when it was closing.
Yeah.
And then when it closed, I felt this incredible physical feeling that you were asking me about. So that's a feeling I'll never forget, because I've only felt it once, and it felt like zero gravity combined with the feeling of hydroplaning going forward. So those two feelings were combined for about 10 seconds. And that's when this electronic fog, I call it, attached itself to the aircraft. And I just thought it was some kind of a fog.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a normal fog. And it took me 30 years to figure out that it was attached to me.
I think it's absolutely amazing. We can only say thank you that you actually survived, you know?
Yeah.
What did you want? Sorry. Yeah, come on. What were you going to say, Bruce?
Oh, well, it's almost like fate that I survived this for sure. Because of, like I was telling you, all the timing, how it worked out. And so when I got in this electronic fog, was heading on a course that would take me toward Miami. And I was so confused as to what to do. I figured I'd just keep going straight and not make any turns. And I was able to contact Miami radio, and they couldn't identify me on radar. And they said there were no storms out there in the Bahamas. They said it was clear.
Yeah.
All the way.
Bruce, Mark's got a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
Mark?
What's that?
I was just wondering when you were in the fog, in these phenomenon, that did you experience any type of instrumentation failure?
Oh yes, as soon as I was in the fog, or maybe inside the tunnel too. I never looked at the instruments when I was inside the tunnel, and but as soon as I got out and in the fog, I checked them out, and they weren't working it properly. So I couldn't figure out my exact position with the instruments. But according to time, which we monitored very carefully back then, because we didn't have these GPS instruments that they do today. And so according to time, we should have been about 90 miles east of Miami after I got out of the tunnel. I was 100 miles east of Miami when I entered the tunnel. And my instruments couldn't verify that. And then even my magnetic compass was slowly spinning non-stop counterclockwise. And, so the radar controllers knew there was something wrong, something odd going on. I couldn't figure out where I was. And that happens to be in the same exact spot that I called the radar controller, that the famous Flight 19 that got lost also contacted their base, the Navy base, and told them they weren't sure of their position. The same thing I told them, and they said their instruments weren't working properly, the same thing I'd had. And they said that everything looked strange, the same thing as me. That's why I couldn't identify where I was, because I'm flying inside this fog, and I thought I'm flying through the fog. So it's kind of like flying inside a milk bottle. A famous author once wrote when he was in it, Martin Caden, a famous aviator. And so I was in it for like 3 minutes when all of a sudden it electronically dissipated. And by that I mean it detached itself from the aircraft. And it took about 10 seconds for that to happen. Where all these lines formed parallel to our direction of flight. I thought the lines were miles long, but then later I realized that when I came up with the theory of how it attaches to you, that I realized that those lines were maybe only a few hundred yards long. And they got wider and wider, and I could see the blue sky through the cracks, and then within 10 seconds it was clear air and good visibility everywhere. But I looked behind me and I'm expecting to see this big fog bank, and yet it was perfectly clear behind me. I didn't understand how that could be. And then the radar controller came back and identified us right over Miami Beach. And so that was good news. And from there I went to Palm Beach International. And,
but weren't you also it's like you had jumped forward many miles, like you were... When you came out of the fog, you still should have been about 90 miles off the coast, but you were right off the coast instead?
Well, that's right, yeah. When the radar controller told us we were over Miami Beach, I looked at the time on my watch, and I told him, no, he's wrong. I told him we were probably about 85 miles east of Miami. And then I realized, well, yeah, it was Miami Beach. But so I traveled from when I entered the tunnel 100 miles from Miami. I traveled to Miami in only 3 minutes and 20 seconds.
Wow.
So that would mean I have to be going close to 2,000.
Yeah, faster than Concorde.
Yeah, 2,000 miles an hour.
And you were flying a Cessna?
Beechcraft Bonanza.
Beechcraft, okay. Yeah, definitely won't go that fast. So you have this experience, and of course, it's been documented and talked about for the last few decades. Now, you've had all this time to think about it. You've written a couple of books about it, but now you have the new book, Bermuda Triangle Survivor, and you indicate that you've come to some different, your research has been ongoing, and now you have some different ideas or theories about what you may have experienced?
Yes, I'm always coming up with new theories. I mean, not every day, but I've been researching this for 53 years, so maybe every few years or so I come up with something. But, well, one of the things that scientist David Paris that I worked with, Professor David Paris, he came up with a theory that he developed along with me while we were trying to figure out how this happened. And at first I couldn't find what he said. This was a few years ago. Mm-hmm. He thought that while I was in the tunnel, well, that's when space-time started changing, but I knew that. But he thinks that when I came out of that tunnel, I was 10 miles offshore of Miami. And then it took me 3 minutes, which would be right, according to what speed I was going to reach Miami. So that's a total of 3 minutes and 20 seconds. So in other words, he's saying when I came out of that tunnel, I traveled like 80 miles.
In time?
In less than a second.
So you sort of traveled forward in time then?
Time and space, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you thought that in miles an hour, it would be hundreds of thousands of miles an hour. It was instant. And that's when I felt that zero gravity combined with hydroplaning. So he might be right. I mean, he's been researching this now. I've been working with him for over 10 years. And now he's from the University of Nebraska. And now he's developed a whole team from some other scientists that are from his universities that he teaches. And what he's done is he's in his laboratory, he has replicated what I experienced with the microscopic elements. In other words, he is able to transport an element, say, a distance of only a few feet.
Yeah.
But instantly, it travels that distance. I guess you can't even measure how fast it got there. It just goes from one spot to the other instantly. And he's trying to he's got a patent on it now, and he's trying to get some more government funding to help him to develop what he calls it a warp drive. So he could be right. And,
that's apropos, I think. You know what fascinates me with your experience and a lot of other people who've had these experiences in that area, there are a lot of other locations around the world exhibiting similar strange phenomenon. I liken what you're going through when we talk about portals. It sounds appropriate. Some kind of space-time rift. The description of like the symmetrical shape that you saw is very similar to what they've described out on the Skinwalker Ranch out in Utah. They're doing their ongoing research out there on the television show. And, you know, they've been talking about for years of seeing these portals open either up in the sky, and then it'll be dusk and then a portal opens so you can see bright sunshine and blue sky behind it as a craft flies through, and then it closes up. Other times a portal opens up and some humanoid creature crawls through it, jumps out and runs into the nearby woods. There's also all the stories when you mentioned the people disappearing. You know, David Paulides with his books on missing people in the national parks.
Yeah, just like Bimini, like I was telling you.
Exactly. That's what came to mind. Is something happens, something opens up, and a person is there 1 minute, and the next minute they're gone.
Yeah.
And I do believe it's some kind of interdimensional type of phenomenon.
Yeah. The Skinwalker Ranch is that's going to be on, I think, tonight, and
tonight's the finale as we're recording this. Yes,
it's going to be pretty good. Apparently, they're going to announce that they may have discovered the portal. They're getting awful close to it. So the thing that I flew through up in the air appears to be another kind of portal, and something I recently discovered has to do with the theory of relativity, E equals mc squared. It's called length contraction. It's part of Einstein's theories on length contraction. And what he says that how this works is that when a body approaches the speed of light, in my case, the tunnel would appear to contract. And that's what happened when I entered this thing. I thought it was about 10 or 12 miles long, but I was only in it for 20 seconds, so somehow it contracted when I entered it. And then he says that the exit would be much shorter in time because of this length contraction, and that's what happened. And instead of it should have taken me 3 minutes to go through that tunnel, but it didn't. It contracted, and I was only in it for 20 seconds. And then another thing to this theory is that if you go by while this is happening, if whatever you're going by, like if his case is outer space, and there'd be like planets or stars that he'd be going by at the speed of light, they would appear to rotate around whatever body, in my case, airplane, you are in. And that's another thing that happened. As soon as the airplane entered the tunnel, all these little clouds, and I believe my new thoughts are that the tunnel was like perfectly round. The walls of the tunnel were perfectly round, but then there were other clouds scattered all around in the tunnel. And so what happened when the body of the airplane entered the tunnel, all these little clouds started rotating, and they formed like a line in front of me as I went through the tunnel. So it's exactly what happens in length contraction. Of course, he's talking about the speed of light, and I didn't have any feelings like I was going the speed of light until the gravity and hydroplane feeling came.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still unexplainable, but it's there's a correlation without a doubt with the length contraction theory from the theory of relativity.
Well, it's what they also refer to as an Einstein-Rosen bridge, which, and like what they're going to talk about on Skinwalker Ranch, is basically called a wormhole. And wormholes have been very much used in science fiction for the last few decades as a quick way of traversing across the universe without being dragged down by going the speed of light. And yet now it seems like to be a very real phenomenon. And, you know, the fog that you encountered, it reminds me of another incident, which is infamously known as the Philadelphia experiment. And when back in the 40s, when they were using these high generators on the USS Eldridge to try to basically make the ship invisible to radar, and from what I understood, that they were using Tesla technology, that they created with the massive electromagnetic field, they created one of these wormholes. And the Eldridge disappeared out of the Philadelphia harbor and supposedly reappeared where I think it was up near Boston, and then came back. But people who were on the ship described the fact that they couldn't see anything, that the ship was surrounded by this thick, weird fog, which sounds almost like the electric fog that you described around your aircraft.
Yeah, if they actually did that, yeah, the electronic fog would definitely be involved in something like that. Do you know if somebody died during that happened or disappeared?
Well, first of all, there's only rumors, and because the government doesn't ever acknowledge that this event ever happened. People have come forward saying that they were involved with the project. One of the famous descriptions was that supposedly it made some crew members actually get fused into the metal deck. Like it made the ship itself pliable or almost non-material, to the point where when the ship materialized, the people materialized half in the deck.
Yeah, so that had to kill those people. So the government was really responsible for dying. So I mentioned to you the well-known Dr. Valentine was a researcher back then, and he was good friends with the chief of that event that you were talking about. I forget his name. He was another doctor, a good friend of Dr. Valentine's, and he helped mainly design the whole thing. It was really he was the chief scientist, and so after that happened, he started talking about it. And Dr. Valentine, he used to get really upset when he told me about this. He said that they murdered him. The government murdered him. They called it a suicide, but Valentine was positive that it was the government that murdered him. So yeah, the government I suppose they could do something back then like that, especially back then. You know.
Yeah, and they still do.
Yeah,
in my opinion, you know, we have no proof of anything like that, but yeah. Yeah, very, very there's so many projects that have been involved. I mean, and in and around the Bermuda Triangle, there are other quote unquote triangles around the world where mysterious things happen. Our guest last week, Mike Rickensecker, has written a book about what they call the Alaskan Triangle, which is a whole section of Alaska where all these weird type of phenomena happen. People have seen UFOs, people have experienced time slips. Just these areas around the planet, not just in the Atlantic between the Bahamas and Bermuda, but other locations that just seem to have this high electromagnetic energy that causes definite distortions in space-time, possible doorways to other dimensions. Flight 19, didn't they eventually find those aircraft on the bottom of the ocean within the last 20 years?
No, but they thought they did, and they even announced it, and there was the whole world was getting excited about it. They found 5 of the Navy Avenger bombers only a few miles offshore of Fort Lauderdale, and we're all together. Like they were supposedly in 1945, they all ditched together, and these were all together. And then, so it took, I don't know, maybe quite a few months to identify them. They have to find the IDs numbers, serial numbers on them. And then they found them, and then they found out they were not the Flight 19. They ended up in the deep Atlantic, part of the Sargasso Sea, very deep and unexplored areas there.
So to find 5 bombers like that, it almost sounds like a plant, because otherwise you would have heard of 5 more missing bombers, and you never heard of that. So it almost sounds I
think we done a show on that a few years back, Mark.
And we might have.
They went off radar at the same time.
Yeah, that was famous back in 1945, right at the end of World War II, and they went through the Bermuda Triangle, and they vanished. In fact, one of the last communications with the commander of that mission was first saying they were off course, they didn't know where they were, and then
they were disorientated.
Very disoriented, and then they said, "Don't come after us. They look like they're from outer space. Don't come after us."
Like ham radios operators picked up a lot of comments that are similar to what you just said. Then the Navy won't admit to them. They by the ones that they made, and so there's nothing real weird going on, except that they did tell them that their instruments were not working properly and the compass was off.
Well, and then they sent out the PBY to go look for them, and it vanished too.
Yeah, that may have exploded though.
Why would it? Let me ask you this. I'm asking just because I'm genuinely curious. Why would an aircraft like that explode?
Well, they used to call it the flying gas tank. It held a lot of fuel. It could travel all around the world. And it was able to land on the ocean waters, no problem. Even in 6-8 foot seas, it could land. So if they would have had a problem, they could have just landed, but they didn't. But if they exploded, well, there may be just a bunch of pieces. People saw an explosion that were out on the ocean in that area that same time that it happened. So that's what happened. I think it exploded. But
That's something new I was never aware of. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm positive that it was electronic fog. That after I started researching the Flight 19, and it affected my emotions for exactly what they had experienced. This exact same thing I had in the same exact area, and that's why they got all confused. And this is what I try to tell pilots. If you got any pilots listening, if you get caught in this electronic fog, it's hard to figure out whether it's attached to you or you're flying through fog. But you notice it's different than normal fog. It kind of got sparkles in it. It's fuzzy looking. So if you're in it, what you want to do is just don't make a lot of turns. And this is where all people have crashed. That's what may have happened to Flight 19. They may not have disappeared. They may have just crashed way out in the deep blue Atlantic, and so they can't find them. But many pilots have died when they get caught in this electronic fog. They get immediately. Of course, they're going to get confused, just like I did. But fortunately for me, I didn't make any turns, and I also had a compass in my mind, so I used that to steer straight. So if it's good to have that compass in your mind. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Irene.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's very difficult this end. I can't see you. I can't tell what you're doing. One thing I wanted to ask: when you landed the plane, you got off onto terra firma. What were the first things that went through your mind, and how did you feel? You obviously, it's made a big impact on you because you've for over 50 years you've been researching it. So that particular time when you first stepped down on terra firma after landing the plane, what was the feeling?
Well, as soon as I landed, I was kind of relieved that I knew that was an incredible flight.
Yeah.
And then I taxied to customs, to clear customs, and so then I looked at the watches, and I noticed that there was like a 30 minutes or 40 minutes of time missing, and somehow I got way ahead of the normal time, and that added to my confusion about the incredible flight I just made. And so that's what went through my mind. My dad and our business partner passenger were also confused with it. We really couldn't really explain it because none of us realized that space-time had everything to do with what we experienced. We had a space-time warp, and so we didn't even know that it was a space-time warp. We didn't know what it was. But with all my research, I figured it out. That's exactly what happened. And that's what happened to Flight 19. I can guarantee you that they may have had some space warp also in the electronic fog. But, they made a bunch of turns, and that's what's happened to many other pilots that have died because of the electronic fog. Like, if they make too many turns, see, after you've made, say, 3 turns, you're kind of starting to lose track of which way is north. And then if you make any more turns, then you're totally lost. You have no idea which way you're flying because your compass is spinning, and in modern times, your electronics are going to be shut down. The screens that they use nowadays, instead of the round instruments, they would probably just be turned off. They'd be blank. So they won't be able to use there won't be many instruments they can use. They may have some physical backup instruments that they could use. But they're going to be so confused that what happens to them is they end up getting spatial disorientation and end up doing a graveyard spiral. So that's what I try to tell any pilots to be aware of. If they ever get caught in it, don't start making a bunch of turns. Decide what to do immediately, what you're going to do as far as the direction you're going. And if you're
sorry about that. That's
over the ocean,
something going on Mark's end there.
Okay.
Yeah.
If they're over the ocean, they should make one turn if needed to turn toward a main body of land. Because the electronic fog should dissipate when you transfer from the ocean to the land. And then just the opposite. If they're over the land, they should turn toward the main body of ocean. And then it will detach, which it did to me on where I had a second experience with electronic fog over the Everglades. And since I was over land, I turned toward the ocean, and then it electronically dissipated from the aircraft. That was back in 1996 that I had that second experience with electronic fog. And in my new book, and on YouTube, I just did a video on electronic fog and how it's formed. There's like I've got 3 different names for it. Like the storm out in over the Great Bahama Bank, I call that a circular vortex squall because it was so large. And the other type of storms, I call them a thunderstorm vortex tunnel or a time storm. It would be good for them. And the main thing is that the vortex tunnel has formed within the thunderstorms. And if you fly through that tunnel, you're going to have a space-time warp. And so this happens a lot in the Everglades. And so I was able to capture a photograph back in 1978. And I've kept it all this time, and it's still the best photo ever taken of how these thunderstorms with the vortex tunnel formed. And this was over the northern part of the Everglades, and this happens a lot over the Everglades. And so I've got 2 photos. They're in my new book on page 84, and they're on the YouTube also. I just posted it on YouTube yesterday, and so it shows the photos show thunderstorms, and they're 1 minute apart, and so you can see how the anvil heads form on the thunderstorms, and then the anvil heads connect, and a tunnel is formed. And I explain it in detail on YouTube, and then the photos are also in my book. And then I've also got photos of radar images that I caught that are very rare, and it shows donut-shaped storms out over the Everglades and in the Bahamas that are very rare. Circular-shaped squalls.
Sounds very interesting, this book. I think I'll have to get hold of it.
Yeah, the fact that there's also activity down in the Everglades too. I mean, you hear the Bermuda Triangle, and that was the term coined back in the day. It's technically not really a triangle. It is an area, and I do believe the area fluctuates, where it undulates and changes shape or does whatever. It just covers the general area down there. So if it's going to come, like the tip of Miami, but there's no reason why it also couldn't go farther down into the Everglades.
Yeah, it's definitely in the Everglades. And then just recently, only a year ago, I captured another time storm that formed over the southern end of the Everglades. Now, I lived in the Keys for 20 years, and so I had a good view of the Everglades in Florida Bay, and I've seen a lot of these vortex tunnels form, but this was a really good one, and so I not only captured it with photographs, but I have a video of it, and it's really neat looking. It's because the sun has just set, so it's just starting to get dark, and you can see this tunnel that's formed in between the thunderstorms. At one point, the tunnel turns square, like a square shape, which is really strange, but not strange in some of these clouds, like the hexagon clouds that scientists claim are very dangerous. And so other people have seen these strange things. It's just like it could be related to like some of these UFOs they say they're cube shaped, they're square. So this happens apparently in meteorology too, but the ones over the Everglades are absolutely natural. And when that tunnel collapses, it emits like a sphere, a puff of the electronic fog. And that's another thing that I just noticed on these two photos that I was telling you about, that I may have captured the electronic fog, an actual photograph of the electronic fog, because there were 3 tunnels, and in the photos, it really only shows 2 tunnels. But when I took the photo, the 3rd tunnel had just collapsed. And so you can see some strange shapes in the photos where that tunnel collapsed. The one is kind of like a blurry looking cloud or something, and then the other one is more like in a line, and it's dropping down toward Earth. So I'm thinking that's got to be the electronic fog. But same thing I experienced in the Everglades, and other pilots also have experienced in the Everglades.
Well,
So
Bruce,
it's a meteorological condition in that case.
well, we are coming up on the end of the program here. The one thing, I'm just going to mention this briefly. Last week, there was this supposed disclosure meeting for members of Congress there, where the military and former military came out and started talking about UFOs, and we have these craft and whatnot. But there was one description you just made that sounded very similar to what they mentioned as the cube.
Yeah.
That these military folk had seen a cube-shaped object with what looked like something spherical inside of it.
Oh, yeah.
Sounded very similar to what you just described.
Yeah. That there was the tunnel was originally, it was round, but these tunnels usually last 3 or 4 minutes, and then they collapse. So when it was about to collapse, maybe 1 minute, had maybe another minute to go before it would collapse, it formed a square shape on the tunnel entrance that I'd never seen that happen before. But I had a friend that said he flew through a square hallway once. One of my mentors actually was flying over the Great Bahama Bank right near Andros when he did this. He flew in between 2 storms to get under them, but the area that was in between them was a square hallway.
Very interesting. Well, the book is called Bermuda Triangle Survivor. Pilot tells what he experienced in the heart of the phenomenon. And Bruce, where can people find your book?
Well, they can find it on Amazon. They're the ones that published it. And I'm really happy with it because you can get it in hardcover, and it's got all color photos in it for the first time of all the books I wrote. They were always black and white. Well, this one's in color, so it makes it nice. And then on YouTube, if they want to check out my channel, you go to Bermuda Files to find my channel. or you can search electronic fog. That's my niche, the electronic fog. So hopefully it'll help me to be successful producing these videos on YouTube, since I have a niche that no one else can claim.
Excellent. Well, Bruce, thank you very much for coming back onto the program and talking about this again, and definitely shed some new light onto the phenomenon. I highly recommend everybody to pick up Bruce's book. And Bruce, thank you again for coming on. This has been a pleasure.
All right, thanks, Mark. Yeah, it was real interesting, and I hope there's some young scientists, amateur scientists out there interested in meteorology and physics that will check out my research, because there's a lot to be discovered yet about something that I believe will be very important for our future and also for the present. And it's going to save lives in the present. Once we've learned how to harness this energy, then we'll probably use it to time travel to other stars.
That would be nice.
I'll tell you one boy, one young boy that will be very interested in this book, and that's my grandson.
Great, yeah.
He loves
Designed for young adults, really.
Yeah, this is his field. This is exactly what he loves. So I'm going to tell him about your book. I might even buy it for him, actually.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you, Bruce.
Yes, Bruce. And want to thank everybody else for tuning into another episode of the Paranormal UK radio show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK radio network. We'll be back next week with a special edition show coming from the UK. And Irene, where can people hear us?
A special edition show, me and you arguing.
In person. So
yes.
I can reach over and smack you if you get out of line. Or I'll just yell at Brian to come over and get you under control.
You haven't seen my left hook, have you?
No.
I'll show you it when you come. Okay.
All right.
Where can everyone find us? Everywhere.
Everywhere. All right, everybody. Thank you again. Have a wonderful evening, and we will catch you all next time. Be good humans. We'll talk with you soon.
Bye.